It's recording.
Hi, EDSC 320. I'm Grace,
I'm Jesus.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Jose.
and we're presenting Developing Active Agents of Learning. So the quote that we're really answering is, "Trust in the capacity of this generation to disentangle itself from the embroilments of a divided society." We'll be focusing on the cognitive transitions, primarily the misconceptions and faults of adolescents, including the reality and positives of those faults, and achievement, primarily their cognitive perspective of achievements, two teaching strategies that teachers can use to capitalize on those positives of their faults, and how adolescents can be disentangled from society. So one of the big misconceptions that is very common is children are more argumentative once they hit adolescence. This causes a rift between adults and adolescents because adults believe adolescents aren't listening to them anymore or are trying to be better than them. And they assume that we as adolescents question everything they do for the sake of arguing, but that's not true. Even though the questioning is a good thing, Chapter 2 talks about how it's dangerous for us as adolescents relate values of their families to something that's completely unrelated. So an example in the book states like how many families believe that like you shouldn't have sex until you get married. But then adolescents might be thinking, well, modern wise, well, we're in the 21st century and people do that all the time. Now, the danger of that is like, yeah, you are thinking in a much more broader perspective, but you are relating two different things that don't make sense and that they don't collide with your values. It just contradicts it. Another thing is that like how, because parents don't understand their children, their children feel like they have to take on the role of being argumentative in order to get things that they want. The good thing about this, about them becoming better arguers, is that they no longer accept simple or illogical reasons, and they analyze other people's perspectives of rationality before they form their own better arguments. And they feel this need to attack and question things because they need a much more logical reason. They think it's unfair, or they just want something in their favor. Next one. So cognitive change and achievements. So adolescents have higher developed cognitive thinking, which helps them look at the bigger picture scenario and not just something school-wise. Page 438 in chapter 12 states, cognitively capable of seeing long-term consequences of their educational and occupational choices. So adolescents think more realistically on the long-term consequences, especially when making certain decisions. So let's say they enroll to certain colleges, they get into certain careers, or they just make a schedule that is based on both their times and other people's times, and they have to think, well, how will this affect them 1 week prior to this, or maybe 2 months after this. They also think hypothetically, which correlates to chapter 2 in new achievement concerns, like attending a certain college now, or they attend it later as they're working. And they also question things logically and systematically. Like, if I decide to go to college, then what happens?
So next, the part of achievement within teaching strategies to promote the development of active agent learning. The first teaching strategy is think, pair, share. First, students will be given a time to think independently about a topic they can critically think about. And then they'll share with a neighbor what their ideas are, and then they'll share with the entire class, and they'll come up with a conclusion to what the topic means. This relates to chapter 12 of adolescence achievement. Think, pair, share is a great strategy to help students disentangle our divided society. It creates an atmosphere where they can feel safe to share their opinions freely and openly. You can create even a list of guidelines for the students to follow, such as no racial slurs or no interrupting somebody while they're talking. Your sole duty as a teacher is just to facilitate the conversation and make sure that the conversation is moving in the right direction and being productive. Helping students learn how to argue in the real world. It's important that you keep the conversation going, but also give time for students to think.
Another teaching strategy that future educators can be used to help this generation disentangle itself from the embodiments of a divided society is incorporating more technology in the classroom. Chapter 7 briefly talks about on page 2 or 3 about the effects of social media having on adolescents, how they're easily manipulated by it. But incorporating technology in your teaching is a great way to actively engage with your students, especially as digital media surrounds young people during the 21st century. Interactive whiteboards or mobile devices can be used to display images and videos, which help students visualize new academic concepts. Learning can become more interactive when technology is used, as students can physically engage during lessons as well as instantly research their ideas, which develops autonomy. But most importantly, it provides them with new information and materials that can include their culture in class, creating unity and a sense of pride, in which students feel left out in modern day curriculums. Uh, I'd like to go back to our mission statement, which says, trust in the capacity of this generation to disentangle itself from the bottoms of divided society. I feel technology is one of the best ways to do this because it teaches them how to fact check. It makes sure what they're reading is true. This is important because oftentimes news is pushed with biases, which divide society. So biases leads to misinformation, which oftentimes leads to stereotypes, which leads to division in society. But as educators, technology is a plus because students can actively correct you if you're wrong. It breaks the stigma that teachers know everything, but they are learning as well as the students as they are teaching their class. Next slide.
All right, now how will both of these lessons lead to their disentanglement? So because students are at a critical phase in their life, as they become more self-autonomous, given that they're adolescents in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grades, it's crucial that we take part in their growth so that they can grow capable enough to disentangle themselves from society's embroilments. By incorporating the think, pair, share, as well as technology in the classroom, we prepare them for the society we live in. So how so? The think, pair, share will encourage thought before action while in a safe environment in a classroom. In the real world, there's often going to be the same environment, although with higher stakes. For example, an interview, where acting without much thought can often lead to consequences. If asked a question in an interview and blurting out an answer without properly understanding it, it can often lead to maybe having the job refused, or in a friendship, where saying something harmful or inappropriate can often lead to breaking the trust between you and the other person. A safe environment in a classroom allows them to think before acting, which can then lead them to take the skill into adulthood and then prepare them for society's issues where everything is a lot more critical. Now, how will technology prepare them for adulthood? Because we live in an increasingly technological world with much information around us, it's important that adolescents are capable enough to understand what is credible and uncredible, biased and unbiased, and true or false. With all the information going around, it's important that they realize what is true and what is real. We shouldn't allow them to believe the misconceptions that currently exist in today's divided society. When they are capable of doing so, they'll be more capable of disentangling themselves from today's divided society. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.